All right, guys, we're here in Louisville, Texas at the American Amusement Auction. We're gonna do a quick walkthrough of the entire auction lineup. And then next week, we're gonna hit you with the actual live auction action. All right, guys, so this is one of the more interesting things I've ever seen in an auction. A big, huge pedestal cab converted into a 19-in-1 for no reason at all. There's no reason you'd use this exact setup. These pedestals, of course, loved by Naomi fighting game players. But this was probably someone's home unit. They loved these games and decided to just go for it. It looks okay, it looks fine. It's a 19-in-1 illegal emulation. Not something we'd ever do, but maybe the monitor looks okay. Maybe I'll end up buying this to finally give our fighting game players the pedestal they've been asking for. And then we've got a just nice line of broken junk, Maximum Force, Cruising USA, both fine games, but you know, in this condition, this tough. Police Trainer, of course, one of my famous guilty pleasure games. A Xevious running some kind of a multi, since this is Space Invaders on the screen. Another boxing fighter, they pop up at every auction. Ring King, cool game that's been requested quite a bit. You saw it a lot in our walkthrough of our deep storage because they are common conversions that end up going relatively cheap. Pole Position, Pole Position 2. As a kit, Pole Position 2 is quite valuable since it was just released as a kit for Pole Position 1, but a non-working game is gonna probably scare off most people. Next to a broken Excite Bike, Target Terror. The bad version of Target Terror, so this is like the worst Target Terror you can get. Early Raw Thrills game, still considered probably the best Raw Thrills game. Target Terror Pro, though, quite the upgrade. This is that trophy hunting Baramoose. We've talked about these Sammy games before where they had voice actors do the animal death sounds, which is, you know, probably good, but it also makes for some hilarious just noises coming out of this game. Electronic Darts, another boxer. This is a single monitor play choice in really rough shape that has at least balloon fight. I think it has 3 or 4 games, but the buttons aren't working as well as they should. A rough super system, and then of course we see the famous Vroom multiplay stuff there. So I'm assuming it's a real super system, and I bet Vroom bought a bunch of these because they were so kid friendly, because they were basically the arcade version of SNES, but you can see by the rust and everything, this one's been well abused. Double Axle, really bad, but kind of a charming dune buggy monster truck game. Atari Centipede, another play choice with it looks like all 3 Marios, but the buttons on it are pretty weak. 2 dedicated Thomas waves next to each other, faster than speed, of course. Pretty well known for its rare seat that was attached to a dedicated Thomas wave cabinet. If nothing else, it's an interesting oddity, and it clearly meant to just rip on Need for Speed. We got 2 Big Buck Hunter Pros next to each other. A dedicated Big Buck Safari that just looks kind of atrocious, but it's interesting. Silver Strike, of course, a game that we're kind of controversially putting in our arcades. They're doing really, really well. If you're having a beer and you want to play a quick trackball game, there's no problem with Silver Strike bowling. Zybot's playing, not Zybots, something else, some Xevious game. And I don't even recognize that Xevious, but it's definitely Xevious. Really interesting. Play choice then, looks like a Dr. Mario, bad monitors. Century Phoenix, one of those games you saw in our walkthroughs that we're trying to get out more and more of these Century games. Midway Gorf, we've got the best Gorf I've ever seen at Arlington. We're probably only gonna have that one out. In terms of like design and cabinet design and just how it looks, I think every arcade should have one, but in terms of gameplay, it doesn't do well with modern audiences. Snk Game Wars, famous for being weirdly offensive, racist, sexist, but it looks really, really cool. If you can catch the side art, it's just totally absurd, really neat. Dedicated Namco cabinets, one that we've been trying to put out, that style, of course, it looks like someone just, you know, put some lipstick on a pig with some new T-molding, trying to cover up what is really a nasty cabinet. Broken Missile Commands. This, I'm assuming, is a Return of the Jedi cabinet that's been vroomed and is terrible now. Another Centipede. Color Vector Space Duel, haven't seen it on, probably isn't working. Really, really cool Atari Assault, and I've said before, this would be one of the all-time greats if it was multiplayer, but it's well known for its form factor on the cabinet. Really cool. Super High Impact Football, famous for its 1-button play. Sega Hang On, we've got a few of these. This one has these sweet flame handles, but one of the games that we couldn't keep on the floor very easily because people, whether it was kids or drunks, would lean against it and slowly warp the controls and eventually become non-functioning. Another Thomas Wave sport shooting, got kind of the whole bad Atomic Wave lineup here today. Pretty faded Donkey Kong. We are in the market for Donkey Kong, but that one looks pretty rough and old. So look at this. This is a Tapper cabinet with Trog artwork and a Varoom marquee. So really sad because, you know, Tapper is one of our favorite games. Hopefully whoever buys that, even if we do, it turns back into a Tapper really fast. Pretty decent looking Defender. Main event. Pretty cool, goofy game, known for its oversized action buttons, but it's a nice, compact 4-player game. I might actually be looking at this because we have a lot of 4-player games that didn't have dedicated cabinets that would work pretty well right there. Star Castle, cool game. Very rare to find one on, and a little maybe too antiquated for our audiences, but a really cool Cinematronics Vector. Miss Pac, a decent looking Zaxxon. Robotron, so you've got all your standard stuff. Really cool looking. Oh, it's a duck. So what we're seeing a lot of today is 4 or 5 different games all kind of congealed into one cabinet here. It's a cool cabinet though. Track and Field, it looks pretty good. Crystal Castle's of course one of my favorite games. This one's got some nice cardboard right there. So even the games that are working here are all pretty rough. Sega Shinobi, one of my favorite games. We have it at Arlington. Not as popular as I expected it to be. Defender Stargate in a reset loop, probably a RAM issue. A baby pack that booted. It's really rough around the edges, but it did start. A game that I love that is a lot harder than most people remember or want it to be. Another Centipede, Food Fight. We'll see if this one turns on. Food Fight is of course a classic Atari. This cabinet's in really rough shape. I could see it still going for, you know, $1,500, even in its current condition. I guess we'll have to wait and see. Altered Beast, a great game that totally failed at Denton. We hope to keep bringing it out though, because I think it's really fun. It just didn't do so well. A conversion Smash TV, but a good conversion. Looks kind of cool. Yeah, that's really interesting. Looks nice though. Space Invaders, we have buy when we can. Armor Attack, another one of those Cinematronics games that's really cool. Space Wars, you saw 1 or 2 of these at through one of our walkthroughs. Saw one at the National Video Game Museum as well. They turned it on just for those After Dark events. It's a really cool game. I assume this one's not working, and honestly, it would be really, really confusing if we put it on the floor for our people to play. Our regular customers, it's really kind of a hardcore arcade game. More museum-y than it would probably go at a free play. Decent looking Dynamo Cut Corner with Street Fighter 2, probably CE. Looks like a decent conversion. Wide body Mario Brothers, always good. Konami X-Men with the bad joysticks. It'll probably sell higher than it should. NBA Jam, bad joysticks, but the right cabinet. This is gonna be one of the prizes of the auction. A sit-down Atari Star Wars. Atari Star Wars, of course, is one of the all-time great color vector games. The difference is here, if it has a 25-inch monitor, a 25-inch will sell substantially more than a 19-inch. I've been told it works, but I haven't seen it on to test that monitor yet. Rampage World Tour, that I believe this is the dedicated cabinet, but they've moved everything on the control panel really bizarrely. Like they tried to have it running as a 4-player game for a while and converted it back. It might be in a Konami, but I can't tell. That's not how it's supposed to look for sure. And you can play it, Rampage World Tour, of course, at our Arlington location. A dedicated Frogger next to it, another dedicated Track and Field stand-up, all great. Williams Joust with some serious wear, but you know, just means it's been played a lot. Another of the Atari Color Vectors, Black Widow, great game. A Gauntlet 2 that looks like someone tried to, you know, do a little refurbishment work on it. It looks pretty cool. Tempest, we love. It's one of our favorite games. Atari Color Vector. We've seen prices go really high, but in this auction, it's gonna be really interesting to see. Another dedicated Frogger. Wizard of War, early speech game. Doesn't do super great at our arcade, but it's one that we really want to keep on because it is actually a great game. And we just announced that it's going to be one of the games in our Arcade World Championships that we're throwing this spring. Hubert, that is having at least a power issue, maybe more. Cool Midway Gunfight, one of the coolest games ever. Looks like it tried to have a credit button. It doesn't seem to be working. I'll probably come back and mess with this. This is one of my favorite games. I don't know if it'd ever work at free play, but it's so cool. And a very interesting strength game. People have actually asked for these on free plays, and I think that they're kind of cool to find in bars, but it as a free play game doesn't quite work, because then you just keep doing it over and over and you kind of learn how all the tricks. Decent looking defender with the metal coin. Hey, this one looks pretty cool. Looks good. Pac-Man Cabaret, pretty rare. They've been popping up more and more as those prices went up a few years ago. So they're not as rare as everyone was thinking for a while, but still a cool example. Galaga, if you watched our auction videos, you know we love Galaga. Miss Pac that's been painted and tried to clean up, but doesn't have the original sides. It's actually, yeah, it's a Pac-Man cabinet that's been kind of painted to look like a Miss Pac. So this is one of the great tragedies of the auction. They made 500 cocktail jousts ever. And if you've been to Free Play Denton, you've seen one. It's great. This is a cocktail joust that for some reason now has an LCD monitor in it. I'm sure it's some sort of multicade. It's got 2 controllers. I mean, this is one of the all-time great and interesting cabinets that was made in the entire arcade history, and it's been mostly trashed here. Missing all the artwork, missing all the light effects, missing everything. That made that Joust cocktail so great. A really goofy, I think this has popped up at a couple auctions now. Classic football game. It's not as bad as it sounds. It was a real Namco release, and those trackballs play really fun, and you roll them really fast. Unfortunately, it's just, if you want football, you want Blitz. That's just the game that everyone knows and everyone loves. Really cool Bally Midway Robbie Roto cocktail. An Atari Tempest cocktail, and a long time ago, I sold a Tempest cocktail that was in really good shape, and I've regretted it ever since. It was before I knew I was gonna open up any arcades. And then a Miss Pac cocktail. But so when we sold ours for $2,000, our Tempest cocktail, and it was considered like this record-breaking price. Now we're seeing them go $2,500, $3,000, and that's not why I regret it though. I just regret it because it's such a cool way to play Tempest. So, and you heard me rant on this last time. They always have gambling games. They're illegal. No one should be buying them. They're dumb. And then we've got more parts here than I've seen in just forever. And I'll try to pick out the highlights. We've got some CPS2, some Atomic Wave stuff. Then we've got, Laserdisc players. And it just starts getting pretty obscene. Oscilloscope, multi-Williams art. We've got, if you look down here, just a row of monitors. They all look really rough, but that's actually a good chunk of monitors. There's some 6100 vectors in there, some black and white vectors. Really nice lineup. So, what's really cool is you've got tons of Atari Vector stuff, and just, like 15, 20 boards in there. You've got Cinematronics Vectors, you've got some Donkey Kongs, and somewhere around here, there's an iRobot kit. I haven't seen one of those in a long, long time. And this is a full Journey kit. It has the PCB, it even has the MP3 conversion, which we don't actually like. We like the cassette player, but they don't make those cassette players anymore, so that's the only option you have if you don't have one. So, this is just a ton of really interesting, cool parts. A whole box of Smash TV PCBs. These are those massive trackballs you see on Missile Command. Just more and more and more stuff. It's gonna be really interesting to see what some of this sells for. There's a new old stock 49-way joystick over there. Really cool. Really surprising to see it all show up. All right, so we'll knock out this row really quick. So we've got some empty, some gutted cabinets and stuff. There's a couple of cool things I wanna show you. If you watched any of our walkthrough warehouse videos, you know that Devastators was the very first arcade I ever bought. And we've seen a couple conversions. This is a dedicated Devastators, really cool. Terrible game. Not at all what anyone should be playing, but it shares a cabinet, either identical or very similar to the Contra cabinet. And my dream, we have some Contra boards laying around. My dream is to have a Devastators Contra in one cabinet so I can switch and still play my original Devastators, because it's not a great game, but it was my first. And there's something just awesome about that. And then I wanted to show something over here really quick. So this is invaluable, but it's really interesting. This is a Willis control panel for Asteroids, not just a control panel overlay. They sold these entire control panels to try to mimic the Atari stuff. So you even have little volcanoes. If you look at them, they're not quite right. All the buttons are wrong, but they're in the right layouts. And you could buy this as one whole. It was like $200 or $300 back in the 80s. And you could just replace your entire control panel as it got ruined. Really interesting. All right, so we've got some actual slot machines and some newer slot machines, including a Back to the Future slot machine right there. Those normally sell for more than I think they should, but man, it is weird to see them just out on an auction floor here in a state where gambling is generally illegal. All right, so we're gonna kind of just quickly walk through. This is a very big pinball line, one of the best I've seen in an auction ever. So you've got like a New Stern Spider-Man, but then you've got some heavy hitters. You've got a Twilight Zone, Tales of the Arabian Nights, next to a TNG Star Trek Next Generation, next to a Lord of the Rings. TNG kind of having a resurgence as of late, being considered one of the best pinballs of all the time. We've had it on the floor a lot. We're working to bring another one back out. We have a few in the collection. One of those late Williams Flintstones, not a great game, but looks like it's well taken care of. Stern Playboy, which always sells more than it should, just because of the theming. People like to, you know, if you have a man cave, it's kind of a weird point of pride to have a terrible Playboy pinball. Gottlieb Black Hole, if you've been to Arlington lately, I think we have the best black hole around, but this one does look pretty nice, pretty well loved, with a decent LED conversion kit. Also, if you've been to Arlington, you've seen our Tales from the Crypt. Really cool game. Gottlieb Nightmare on Elm Street. Bad backglass, but actually a pretty cool pinball in terms of the toys and everything. Maybe a little basic, but really cool. 2 Williams Big Guns, nice. A pretty rough F-14 Tomcat. Now this is a cool game though, because it's a Steve Ritchie game, which we love, but also made by Eugene Jarvis. He did all the coding for this game, so it's kind of a nice crossover with both Jarvis, who did Robotron and a bunch of cool early Williams games, and Steve Ritchie, who's one of our favorite pinball designers ever. Williams Comet, totally underrated game, I love it. Williams Sorcerer, quite well loved. Doesn't look in great shape, but a really cool game. A rough Revenge from Mars. Williams Firepower, which I think is also underrated. A cool old Atari Space Riders wide body. Wow, this is really, really neat. I hope it turns on, because that's neat. Atari obviously didn't do very much in pinball, so that is one of the few. Cool Williams Doodlebug single player. If you're looking for like an easy to get into, inexpensive pinball, something like this, a single player from this generation, great option. So we have fewer sit-down games than I've ever seen. Daytona 2 though is actually a pretty cool release. We'll see if they turn on. All right, pretty big jukebox setup. Looks like all CDs though, and I generally only go for the 45 jukeboxes. More gambling machines. A cool Arch Rivals. It looks like a pretty nice kit. Neo Geo, Area 51. And we are actually in the market for Area 51. It's a game that's, we were overstocked for a long time, but as we open up more arcades, we need more and more Area 51s, and we kind of should have been buying more than I think we have. All right, so Point Blank in a Big Blue. Point Blank, a cool game, but you gotta have the dedicated cab for Point Blank. Although, I mean, a Q-Sound Big Blue is also really cool, so might be cool to take the kit out, use the Big Blue for something that belongs in a Big Blue. A few more driver, motorcycle games. A game that we've had quite a few people ask about, one of the Silent Scopes. This is Silent Scopes 2. I think it's a really cool game. It doesn't really survive well in a free play environment, and the parts aren't easily accessible, so it's not quite practical, but I think it's still a cool game. Another Silver Strike. The off-road with a track pack. This is about as big as off-road gets. One of our favorite games that we have on the floor, and we have had some issues getting our second one out. This one does look a little rough around the edges. You can see some extra wear right here. Some pieces not quite fitting together. Obviously the monitor with a pretty serious wave, but still a, great game that'll probably go for more money than I think most people watching this would think. Vroom with Xevious Burn. I don't know what that cabinet is offhand. Oh, it looks like a Galaga 88. Yeah, Galaga 88 on a Vroom. Also don't recognize the cab. A dedicated Data East here with a Magic Sword underlay, LCD monitor, another Super System, a Virtua Fighter converted into a Cruisin' USA. Weird choice. Aero Fighters, Puzzle Bobble. A decent flat screen in this Neo Geo, maybe good for home use, I don't know. It's something I can't get into, but it does look pretty good compared to some that you'll see. Another one of those room baseball games in a Data East cab. It looks like some of these were buybacks probably from the last auction, so they probably ended up taking them back because they didn't get quite the money they wanted for them, threw them back in the auction. And yeah, wow, so there are a ton of rooms coming up. Clax, Galaga, probably a multi. Looks like a Super System All-Stars, I don't know. Or just they also put some SNES, but Vroom was one of the largest holders of arcade games like ever for a while, and no one had ever heard of them. They were in Central Texas, and they had they placed games in daycares. So they would put like 2 or 3 games in every daycare in all of Central Texas. Had like thousands of games allegedly out. And you can see they were all set up for different free play options. They're all pretty rough, but they normally use real arcade PCBs and in place of, for example, the multicades, and primarily because at the time, the multicades were either really, really new or more expensive than just buying mass quantities of these original arcade boards. Of course, now where we're at in history, the multi-boards are trash. These real arcade boards are gold, so they're selling out finally, and we've been picking them a few up every auction. There's a tough one, a Donkey Kong that's been just hacked up. A terrible bottom of the night. Extreme Hunting, we've got every single one of these terrible Atomic Wave dedicated. Extreme Hunting though, maybe one of the better ones compared to some, but still not a great game. A bunch more Vrooms, a newer Golden Tee, a bunch of pedestals for Golden Tee. And then Vroom, there's a quartet that's been turned into a Vroom. Crushing to see, because rebuilding that control panel is not going to be the simplest. You've seen quartet in our collection. A pretty cool looking Express Raider. I don't think that's dedicated, but they sure did a good job converting it. Rare game, weird game. And then we've got Blitz and a House of Dead 3. House of the Dead 3, of course, uses the Chihiro motherboard that most people don't want to work on. That is becoming more and more of a pain. We had House of Dead 3 out for our Weird Games month. No, for a Halloween. It was out for 1 week. And in the course of that week, we probably replaced the shotguns twice, replaced the components of the shotguns probably 3 or 4 times, and eventually just replaced the Chihiro motherboard like 2 or 3 times. It was a very difficult game to keep out, but generally, while they work, they work. Just once they start having issues, they break quite often. So I'm assuming that Express Raider is not dedicated, but it's a really nice conversion because you can see how it's cut off on the marquee, but it looks really cool. All right, that's all we have for today, but check back next week while we're still here at the American Amusement Auction in Louisville, Texas.